Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to How to Train Your Gavin. I don't know if you know this, but witches are some of my favourite supernatural beings of all time. I grew up on the worst witch. I think it was on CITV, it ran in the 90s, it had Georgina Sherrington as Mildred Hubble. That was the witchy show that got me into wanting to be a witch. And I used to do my own spell books, and I used to pretend to cast spells and magic and make my own potions, and I just love witches. Witches are the best. And then I got into watching Charmed when season 5 was airing, but I did of course go back to the beginning and watch it from there by buying the DVD sets, which were I think round about like £50 each way back in the day, and they were expensive. They were so expensive, and I was too young. I had to wait until Christmas for my parents to buy me them. And honestly, I remember one Christmas, actually, a little story time before we start. One Christmas, I think season 4 had just come out, but I still didn't have any of the DVDs. I still needed seasons 1 through 3 as well. And for Christmas, I got season 1, 2, and 3, but I didn't get season 4. And I was like, what's the deal here? I was honestly such a little brat. I was horrible. I mean, not horrible. Like, I was so grateful to have the Charm seasons. But I just remember just saying, where's season 4? Like, the absolute spoiled brat that I was. Not realising that that would have been £200 of DVDs right there. In my mum, right? She's a single mum, right? And she was a single mum back then as well. My dad split a couple of years beforehand. So she had to get me, my sister, and my brother Christmas presents, and she would always go all out for Christmas. She got herself in debt to make sure that we had the best Christmases ever. And I honestly love her so much, and I owe her so much, and I apologise. I apologise for being such a brat on that Christmas and questioning why season 4 wasn't there. I love you. And Charmed is my favourite show of all time, my favourite witchy show of all time, and I also have some favourite witchy films of all time. So I love Hocus Pocus. Hocus Pocus is one of my favourite movies of all time, right? And I'm so excited for Hocus Pocus 2. That's coming out, oh my god, like next week. Next week, on 6 days. 6 days from filming this video. 6 days until Hocus Pocus 2 comes out. I've been waiting so long. I've been waiting for 300 years. And I did my own little rendition of I Put a Spell on You. I put a spell on you. In one of my previous videos, I think a video last year where I dressed up as Winifred Sanderson, and it was part of Believeathon, and I did the whole I Put a Spell on You musical number. I think it was a fantastic time, okay? I will link it down below if you haven't seen it yet. Check it out. And I do actually own the Hocus Pocus and Hocus Pocus the sequel book thing, but I'm not going to read that because I only want to read books that inspired the movies, like not ones that came out afterwards, not novelizations. I'm on about actual physical books that came first and then the movie adapted that book. So there were a couple of suggestions in my TBR video. I think Howl's Moving Castle was one of them. I've already read it, loved it. There was also Stardust as well by Neil Gaiman. Read it and I liked it, it was fine. Love the film though, Stardust is a great film. The Witches by Roald Dahl as well. Love that movie with Angelica Huston. But I did also read that book a few years ago. One that I actually didn't really see to begin with was a comment by Malin, and that is Mary and the Witch's Flower, based on The Little Broomstick by Mary Stewart. I love that film. That film is so good. I didn't realise it was based on a book. I don't think I can fit it in this vlog though. However, now that is on my TBR, so thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. The Witch graphic novel series as well, I would love to read those. Night Books as well was recommended. I read that last year and I loved it. I loved the book and I really loved the movie as well. The movie's fantastic. I think there is a sequel to Night Books actually. It might have just come out. So I need to look that up because whew, I'm just like all of the witchy content. I love it. I love all these books. I love these books being recommended. Somebody mentioned The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe as well. Recently just read that. I did a whole Chronicles of Narnia reading vlog, and that was definitely something. That was something. That was a time. So do check that out if you haven't seen it already. However, if you do actually love the Chronicles of Narnia series, skip it. Don't watch it. The Wizard of Oz was also recommended. I've read that. It's one of my favourite childhood books. And I'm going to read all of the Wizard of Oz books at some point from beginning to end. I think there's 14 books in the series. So I'm definitely going to do a complete series reading vlog for The Wizard of Oz. Kiki's Delivery Service as well. I have it facing out behind me somewhere. I think you can see it through there. And I read it, I think I read it last year or the year before. Loved it. It's so good. It's so cozy and I love it. I always remember the opening paragraph, always. But I'm thinking I might reread it for a Studio Ghibli vlog next year. So keep an eye out for that too. I might also reread House Moving Castle forward as well. There's just so much I have planned in my head. It's just tons, absolutely tons. So thank you so much for your recommendations in my September TBR video. I really appreciate it. I will most likely keep dipping back into the comments of that video so I can get more recommendations from it when I have more time to read things. But anyway, my TBR for this video includes 2 books that inspired my favourite witchy movies of all time. So one of the books is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, and the 1998 film, I think it was 1998. 1998 was a fantastic year for witches. Practical Magic came out, and Charmed began premiering on the WB. What a great year for witchy media. But Practical Magic, love the film with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. Haven't watched it in a while. I actually have a movie night with my patrons tomorrow night to watch Practical Magic, and I'm so excited for it, and it will rejuvenate my memory of it too. So Alice Hoffman wrote the original book that the movie's based on, and I have heard from a few people that the book is quite different to the film. So I'm going to give you a summary of what I think this book is about, and then I will correct myself once I've read this so that I can tell you if I was right or not. But I do believe we follow Gillian and Sally, and they belong to a family of witches, and the witches in this family are cursed. If any of the witches in this family marry a man, then that man will die before his time. That is the basic premise of the movie, and I think maybe the book is pretty much the same. They are still teased and taunted and shunned in their small New England town, so that's still the same. Gillian and Sally want to get away from it all. Years later, tragedy brings the sisters back together. So I think, if what I think from the film, then it might be similar in that regard about the whole curse, the family curse. And I also believe there are 2 prequel novels to this book, so I can still read this book on its own. That's absolutely fine, I think. But a few people did say there were 2 prequel novels before this. So I'm just going to put that out there. I know about them, but I'm not going to read them in this vlog. If I end up loving this, I might end up going back and reading those. But at the minute, yeah, this is my TBR for this video. This and The Witches of Eastwick by John Updike. Now, I'm scared about this one. This one is one of my lowest rated books on Goodreads, based on readers' votes. It is literally so low in rating on my TBR list that it has kind of made me a little bit scared going into it. I have not heard great things about this, but it has that kind of classic print where it feels old. It's not as clear. The letters aren't as clear. They're a little bit, well, not exactly smudged either, but they just look bold. Like, it looks more bold than in a normal kind of book that's published today. If you know what I mean. Like, do you know what I mean? I'll zoom in a little bit more. Like, this is what it looks like, which probably doesn't come across very well on the camera. But if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. If you get it, you get it. It's hilarious as well, because when I was talking about this in my September TBR video, I was saying, oh, this is about 3 witches. I can't remember where they live. I don't know where they live. It doesn't say it on the back. It's literally in the title. It's literally in the title. The fact that someone pointed that out in the comments, and I literally went, I edited that as well, and I still didn't pick up on the fact that I said that when literally the Witches of Eastwick, they live in Eastwick. Oh my god, I was silly, I was dumb, it was a day, okay? But this does follow Alexandra, Jane and Suki. They're 3 women who live in Eastwick, so yeah, I know now. And they are witches, and this stranger comes into town called Darrell Van Horn, and this stranger may or may not be the devil, and he tempts them, he seduces them, and it's up to these 3 women to see through his charisma, his charm, and defeat him. But again, I've heard not great things about this, so I'm scared, but my love for the film should hopefully shine through. And I do have a movie night for this as well with my patrons on Wednesday. I have all the witchy fall vibes in this house, and I'm so excited. It's going to be fantastic. Fantastic reading experience, I think. I did do a vlog, I think back in June, where I read books that inspired my favourite movies, or some of my favourite movies. So if you have not yet watched that one as well, I will link it down below. This is kind of part of that series-ish, where I'm going through books that inspired movies. And this is the kind of second episode for that, but it's kind of low-key. Like, it's not really a full-on official series that I'm running on my channel, but it is part of that. And this is also part of the 9 vlogs of Halloween as well. I hope I get you guys hyped up for Halloween, just around the corner, and get you in the fall mood. So that is my job today. My job today is to entertain you, make you feel all the witchiness and the fallness, and hopefully get excited for Samhain.
Woo! Hang on to your husbands, girls.
My first check-in with Practical Magic, I shit myself when I first started reading this, because I thought there were no chapters. I started looking through, because I like to see when a chapter ends, just ahead of time, you know, just so I know what I'm getting myself into. So I started looking, I was like, wait, hang on, when in the world is this chapter going to end? Is this all one long book? Is it just one chapter? What's going on? And then finally I saw, actually, it's just in parts. So I read the first part, which is Superstition. Superstition is the way. And then Premonitions is the second part, and then so on and so forth. So I'm on part 2, which is called Premonitions. But before this, so far it's been just as I've imagined the film is. Honestly, I was reading this and everything was coming back to me from the film. But then I'm thinking, like, is this actually the film? Am I remembering it correctly? Because it's been so long since I watched Practical Magic that maybe I might be a little bit wrong. I mean, some things have changed, like just glaringly obviously have changed. I don't think there's anything that I'm going to say in this update anyway that's going to be a spoiler. So everything seems to be pretty much similar. We have Gillian and Sally, and one thing I love about them is their sisterhood. I mean, they don't have a perfect sisterhood by any means, especially since Gillian just gets out of town. As soon as she can, she leaves. She kind of leaves her sister behind. And, you know, I feel a little bit sad about that because Sally ends up going through some really tough heartbreak. And then I remembered as well, like from the film too, that the husbands start hearing the death beetle and they constantly hear that until they die. And I started to remember Sandra Bullock desperately trying to find this beetle, pulling up floorboards to stop this beetle, and she can't. There's no way she can stop the death beetle, or like the sound of the death beetle. And then her husband dies, which happens differently in the book. It's a couple of drunk kids, they run him over and crash into him. Whereas in the film, I believe there's just like an accident when like this guy's just driving down and then something falls off something and ends up running into him. God, you know what? It's so foggy, but I can kind of picture it. I just can't explain how that scene played out in the movie. But that is like a little bit different. But the heartbreak is still so sincere and so heartfelt that I could feel it in this book too. And I'm really gelling with Alice Hoffman's writing style. I absolutely love the way this began. I love the very start of it where it's like, for more than 200 years, the Owens women have been blamed for everything that has gone wrong in town. If a damp spring arrived, if cows in the pasture gave milk that was running with blood, if a colt died of colic or a baby was born with a red birthmark stamped onto his cheek, everyone believed that fate must have been twisted, at least a little, by those women over on Magnolia Street. What a great first couple of lines. Really. And I love the way that the sisters are described to begin with as well. Night and day the aunts called them, and although neither girl laughed at this little joke or found it amusing in the least, they recognised the truth in it and were able to understand, earlier than most sisters, that the moon is always jealous of the heat of the day, just as the sun always longs for something dark and deep. And just that parallel between them and what the sun lacks and what it wants, and what the moon lacks and what the moon wants, is so representative of these characters. And when I remember their character progression in the movie, it makes sense. It makes total sense. Loving the writing style. It's so good. And one thing that shocked me as well, one thing that I don't think happened to the movie, but there was a girl who goes to the aunts, like she works in a chemist, and she asks to help this guy fall in love with her, and she has to like stab this dove's heart 10 times over 10 days or something like that, and then he will fall madly in love with her and he won't like leave her alone, and like she knows the consequences but she does it anyway. And this girl, she really wants things to go back to normal because he's become obsessed and she can't get out of it. And she, oh my god, like she actually slaps, I can't remember which sister it was, but they're children at this point, and she actually slaps one of them and she's like, get me your aunts now, like they need to fix this. And that was just so shocking. I genuinely don't think that happened to the movie. And then the chemist girl loses her voice, and sometimes she sounds like a dove, and it's just so twisted and yet so magical too. It's weird. It's a weird one. I can already sense an undercurrent of darkness in the magic that the aunts possess, that these girls possess. And it's great to see that so early on in this book. And I feel like the first part anyway, we blasted through so much, and we go from, you know, the girls being girls to being women, and Gillian going off and Sally marrying and having 2 kids herself, and then her husband dies. It's just so good. It's so good so far. I'm really getting the vibes that I wanted from this. Oh, hang on. The second part doesn't seem to be too long. Page 110. Yeah, because I'm on page 57. And it ends on 110. So only like this part next, which I might read in bed. I might go to bed and read this. I think that'll be really cool, and read some more. I'm happy. I'm so happy with this so far. I am probably speaking a bit too soon because anything can happen from now until the end of the book. But so far so good. This has bewitched me, as they say. I'm about to film my October TBR, so I thought I would dive in here and tell you that I finished reading Practical Magic last night. It is Tuesday and I did my movie night with my patrons on Sunday, so it's been a couple of days since then. And honestly, like that, I love that film so much. And watching it with my patrons as well, I got a glass of wine and a few of my patrons had wine and drink. And it was just such a good time. I always love my movie nights. But it just reminded me just how much I love the film. And it had been that long since I watched it. There were some things that I had forgotten about, some iconic quotes that I absolutely love and adore. And I especially love when Julian's like, hang on to your husbands, girls. And I just love that. That's so good. But also like just the bond of sisterhood and the way that the women of the neighborhood come together to help Gillian. And it's so beautiful. It's so good. I will say though that after finishing this book, it definitely is quite different. And it didn't seem that way to begin with. It seemed quite beat for beat in the first part, I would say. There are things that the movie cut out from the first half, especially to do with that woman who stabs the dove in the heart and gets the man to fall in love with her. I've totally forgot that plot point in the movie. It's not really important in the movie at all. It's just a part at the very start of the movie where Gillian and Sally are really young and they see their aunts perform this magic. And I feel like it's a really cool and impactful moment for them because we see one of them turn away and be so repulsed by it and the other one being like, oh, cool, magic, you know? And I think it sets pretty early on the tone and the kind of consequences from, you know, these actions, and that magic can't fix everything and it's not ideal for everything. And I know magic seems like the ideal solution to everything and the perfect thing and everybody wants it, but there are consequences, there are rules and, you know, things that happen that just... I don't know, I found it quite impactful to have that. I do think though that if you're a little bit squirmish or don't vibe with that, then honestly it happens really early on in this book. So if you don't vibe with that, then probably don't read this. But after that, I can't recall any other instances of using animals in that way, because after that it is quite full on in terms of character. So I would say this is definitely more character driven than plot driven, whereas I feel like the movie had a really good balance of both. The movie, I think, I need to stop comparing it, but the movie I think had a really good sort of way of bringing the sisters together and having them do something that really affects them both, and it still affects in here. But one thing that's different, for example, is that Gillian is the one who kills Jimmy by herself and it's not Sally. Sally doesn't have a hand in that, whereas I think it's a lot more dramatic in the film. And yeah, we still have the really sinister and ominous parts where one of Sally's kids can see Jimmy's ghost in the garden and the roses are growing and stuff. So like there's still like a lot that is very similar. But yeah, it carves its own path, definitely feels a lot more character focused, and we learn a lot more about them and what makes them tick, rather than it sort of being too much about the plot. And I don't mind that. I don't mind a little bit of a plotless novel. But saying that though, there is still, you know, the plot of, you know, Gillian killing Jimmy and the kind of thread from there. I don't feel like the aunts are as prominent in this either, and I don't think the relationship between the aunts and Gillian and Sally are as focused on, but it is something that I found really interesting in this, is kind of the detachment between, like, say, Gillian and the aunts, whereas we only really got, like, a sliver of that in the film when Gillian comes back after so many years away. Whereas in this one, I think it was like 18 years or something before Gillian came back and saw the aunts again, so it's a little bit different. But I did really like the writing style. I thought the writing style was carried on throughout, because you know how I said I really love the way that it opened with the Owens women and the kind of legends around them. I love that kind of start. I did notice as well, actually, though, that the people in the neighbourhood are a lot more accepting of the Owens women, because later on, when Sally's older, she's kind of head of the school committee or something like that, or like people go to Sally for help for a lot of things, whereas people in the film kind of avoid them like the plague, and they try not to interact with them. I mean, it does start off this book with, there's these legends of these women, and if something bad happens, they're always blamed for it kind of thing. But then I feel like that kind of got dropped in the second half of the book when we got into Sally and Gillian being adults. And I guess that just shows the progression of the neighbours, maybe, and kind of the superstitions that they had, they've kind of shed as they've gotten older and they've become adults. I don't know, it just felt a little bit jarring that we had Owen's women are the cause of every wrong thing in this town. 2 are, you know, Sally's head of stuff and people go to her for help and things. Like, I mean, people do still go to Sally for help in the movie and stuff as well, you know, for like little things, you know, especially since she runs the shop that she has with remedies and herbs and things like that. So there are like still little things like that, and I can hear my cats causing a riot in the living room right now. I'm glad they're doing it in there though and not in here, but I do feel like something might smash. So if that happens, it happens. But I do really love the fact that magic felt so natural in this and just part of life for the Owens women. It didn't feel overtly fantastical, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like the movie as well does a fantastic job at keeping that realistic tone. It just had that level throughout where I just thought, oh, this could be real. And the way that Alice Hoffman portrayed that was just so good. So I feel like I would probably give this like a really solid 4 stars out of 5. Really enjoyed it. It's one that I think I would most likely reread in a couple of years' time, just to really like feel the vibe again, because I really did enjoy the vibe of it and the storytelling aspect of it as well. I mean, it's not perfect. I do think that Alice Hoffman had a little tendency to kind of list things, like she was a little bit of a list-like author at certain points, but other than that, I really vibed with it. I really liked her writing style. So yeah, I would definitely continue the series as well and catch me reading the rest of them later on, and to get the prequels, and I'm going to be a fan of this series, I think.
I have nothing against a good fuck, but there is danger here.
So with practical magic out the way, the Witches of Eastwick. So I have my movie night with my patrons tomorrow night. So I want to see if I can try and get as much read before then like I did with practical magic. I don't think I'll finish it by tomorrow though. Again, I want to film my October TBR, edit it, get it uploaded and stuff like that. And I don't know how I'm going to like this one. This one is over 300 pages, 313 pages. As I said before as well, the writing style is a little bit almost like classic style, which I do like, but I feel like it might just make this a bit of a slower read because of the font. And also another thing with practical magic, actually going back to this, the fact that there are only like 4 parts and the 4 parts are like really, really long did slow it down a lot. But because we were focusing on characters more than anything else, it didn't feel too sluggish. Although I did wish it picked up and it had the shorter chapters. I don't know, there's just something about shorter chapters that make it a lot more punchy for me, and I prefer them, even though it's like the same amount of pages. It's just, I don't know, it just would have felt better for me as a reader to read natural breaks in the middle rather than 4 parts in a nearly 300 page book that just lasts so long. Yeah, that's kind of like one of my other little complaints. But yeah, back to Witches of Eastwick. This is definitely going to be a coffee and reading kind of day. It's so nice outside as well, actually. Even though I don't want it to be, I want it to rain. And I'm wearing a jumper as well. I'm going to be hot. This big wasp trying to get in. But yeah, let's see if everybody who's talked to me about this book is correct in that it's a bad book. Okay, I was trying to find where I put my Witches of Eastwick book, and now I can't bloody find it. Then I realised that I think I might have left it in the living room, but I've put the cats to bed. So I can't just go in there and grab it because I would be disturbing them and I'd be a bad parent. So I don't have the Witches of Eastwick on hand. I keep wanting to say the Witches of East End, and I should stop. I wish I was reading Witches of East End, which I actually have already read. But Witches of Eastwick, I already want a DNF. I am... how many pages in am I? I was in the 70s. Why are the chapters so bloody long? This is the second witch book that I've read, and the chapters are huge. I'm not even finished the first chapter. That's how long it is, and I'm in the 70s. And I'm really not liking the writing style. The author, John Updike, he is going far too hard, being all lyrical and having such heavy, dense prose where he's describing just a little bit too much. And it feels rather masturbatory, honestly. Like, I feel like he was writing all of this stuff and jizzing his pants while doing so. That's how intense the descriptions are coming across as. And even just on the first page, there were so many like things to do with sound and the way that they like say Alexandra's or any of the other main characters' voices sounded. It was always like the R's sounded like this and the S's sounded like that. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what their voices sound like right now. It's just a little bit too much, you know? I mean, I don't mind flowery writing. I really don't. But there comes a point where you read flowery writing and you just know that that shit is forced. And that's what this feels like. Not only that, but I'm finding it really gross. This is written by a man, right? And there are so many instances where it just feels gross the way that he's describing these women, or the way that these women look at one another, or the way that they're just portrayed, in the way that they're sexualized. I remember it was like on page 6 in Alexandra, she grabs some tomatoes or something and she's like, she pictured these as her lover's big testicles or something like that. And I was just like, what? What? The women in this book are not written well at all. I can't even remember the film that much now. I don't even know if we're following the same story beats. I don't even know if the scenes are playing out the same. I genuinely need to rewatch the film ASAP, which I am doing tomorrow night anyway with my patrons, so it's fine. But I'm not liking this book. I'm really not. I mean, I gave it the old college try because I knew a lot of people said don't read it because it's shit, but this is what I do. This is what I do, though. I own the book. What was that to do? What was I to do? I bought it because I wanted to read it. And reading it, I am. But liking it, I'm not. Honestly, I would DNF if it wasn't for this vlog. I would just throw caution to the wind and be like, you know what? I'd rather fill in the rest of the book with my imagination. When I get the book back in the morning, I'm not going in there and disturbing my cats. Honestly, I feel bad. It's currently nearly 1 a.m, so I really don't want to do that. Read more tomorrow. I will tell you more, like, specific stuff, tell you more about the story and what have you. And if I like anything, so far I'm not really liking much. I don't even like any of the main characters. They are just, they've got no character. They have no character. And they're just not nice people. They're just not. And they're not endearing. They're not characters I would root for. And honestly, I genuinely felt like the movie is just so different. Because from what I remember, I do like the main characters, but now I'm down myself. I'm down myself from this. I'm so tired. I can't really keep my eyes open. So I'm going to go and sleep and see if I... This is an early night for me, by the way. 1 a.m? That's an early night for me. I'm usually awake until like 3 or 4 a.m. I might actually get to sleep quite early tonight. Fingers crossed. As soon as my head hits that pillow, though, I'll most likely be wide awake and still be awake until 3 or 4 a.m. That's how it usually goes. But yeah, let's carry on this shit show tomorrow. The movie night with my patrons last night was so fantastic. Absolutely loved watching The Witches of Eastwick again, and it made me realise that I'd forgotten so much more than I anticipated. And the lines, the iconic quotes from that film are honestly top tier. Like, we have things like when Felicia's shouting, dildos, anal intercourse in church, hilarious. And also when she says something like, oh Clyde, I have nothing against a good fuck, but there's danger brewing. Just like, oh, it's so funny, it's so good. Cher, Michelle Pfeiffer and Susan Sarandon perfect in the role. Jack Nicholson as well does an incredible performance as Darrell Van Horn. Genuinely a superior adaptation of a book. I genuinely think it beats the book so much, because I did finish The Witches of Eastwick this morning, and I mean, I did start liking it a little bit more the more I went into it. There is a little bit more magic in this than in the film, and it delves more into their sort of powers. Whereas in the movie, like, the magic is so, like, I don't know, underrated, or I don't know the right word of it, but it's just so minimal, I guess is the right word. So minimal, and it just seems to happen. Rather than them forcibly making magic happen, it just seems to happen, other than, you know, the climax when they're trying to get rid of Darrell Van Horn. Other than that, they don't really do very much magic in the film. But yeah, there are still some scenes that are quite similar but changed for the film, such as like Felicia. The character is pretty much nearly the same. I feel like she's more reviled in the book than she is in the movie, and she is still intense, and the whole scene where Clyde, her husband, kills her is, you know, still in this. It happens a little bit differently, but the essence is still there. The scene at the tennis court as well, when the women are batting the ball between them and the ball slows down in the movie and kind of does some like funny things and moves around. But in the book, it kind of changes into different objects, different shapes, different creatures as well. And it's probably a lot more like forcefully magical in the book, which isn't a bad thing, honestly. I did think that this brought out a little bit more magic in these women, but I still really didn't like the way they were described. I didn't like the way they described each other. I didn't like any of the characters. I don't think I ever related or ever saw any sympathy with any of the characters, because they're not nice people, and they even go as far as like intentionally harming other people. Whereas in the movie, I think a lot of it was unintentional. As I said, the magic wasn't as focused. It seemed to just happen around them. Whereas in this, it's like very much a lot more focused and a lot more malicious. And for that reason, it does make the women in this a lot more, well, bitter, a lot more awfully portrayed, I guess. I just didn't find them redeemable by the end, in all honesty. I did like the gothic tone of this, though. I feel like the Lennox mansion where Darrell Van Horn lives is a lot more, I mean, because John Updike, right, he can write. I just don't like the way he writes for 90% of this book. But I think we did get a really good sense of gothicness with the Lennox mansion, and I definitely saw that in his writing style, and it did come across very well in that regard. But just everywhere else, I didn't like the overtly descriptive nature of it. I didn't like the slowing down of the pace just to talk about how this fruit reminds them of testicles and things like that. I just didn't vibe with that. And this is another case where I think the movie is better than the book. I did think the movie of Practical Magic is better than the book, but I think mainly because I have loved Practical Magic for such a long time, and this was my first time reading this. I don't know if my mind would be different if I read this first and then watched the movie. I mean, this is still a great book. I gave this one 4 stars. So I might actually bump it to 4.5, because I think I'm going to give this one 2. I think 2 stars. I was thinking very early on that this would be a 1 star, but, you know, the plot did move along a little bit more, especially when Darrell Van Horn comes into it, and I did like certain aspects of it, but there are just too many negatives that weighed this down that I just can't give more than a 2. I really can't give more than a 2. Probably one of like the worst books I've read this year, but I was expecting to give this 1 star, so maybe I'm like pleasantly surprised a little bit that I didn't give it a 1 star, but I really feel like you would have to overlook so much in order to enjoy this, and I don't really feel like overlooking a whole lot of it. So yeah, 2 stars for this, 4.5 stars for Practical Magic. I think I'm bumping it up to 4.5. At least I found one really great book in this vlog. I would totally recommend it. I'm totally going to read more Practical Magic. I'm going to read more Alice Hoffman. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a very great time. And yeah, I feel like that's it. Wow, I feel like this vlog, nothing happened. Kind of like the first half of this book. I feel bad. I feel so bad. I didn't really do a whole lot. But I still hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on The Witches of Eastwick or Practical Magic. How you seen the movies, how you read the books. Let me know everything. I want to talk to you about these. I am in love with the movies, so I hope you are too. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting my content and allowing me to do videos a lot more often than usual. If you would like to join my Patreon or follow me on any social media, then all of the links are down in the description box. But yeah, hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye.